Hi everyone. So let's understand today Trade Unions Act in 1926. In last video we started with the trade unions, and as a part of this unit, the law which has been passed, the act which has been passed under the Indian Constitution is a Trade Union Act. So what is the necessity? What are the objectives to have to process this act of trade union? When it is true that employees are employers who come together and form the unions for their mutual benefit and their well-being, but just to stop the unfair means and to make it a legal process, the government has made a act regarding the trade unions. So according to these acts, there are certain objectives to regulate those trade unions. Number one is the conditions governing the registration of trade unions, that how the union will be formed, what are the legal procedures to form the unions, and what are the obligations and authorities and responsibilities of those registered trade unions. Second is the obligations imposed upon registered trade unions and rights and liabilities of registered trade unions. So these are the basic objectives to make a law regarding the Trade Unions Act. There are certain definitions which are given by the Trade Union Act 1926, according to which the first term of definition is the executive. Here in this, by this act, executive means the body by whatever name is called for the trade union name, to which the management of the affairs of a trade unions is entrusted. So they are called as executives. Second is a trade disputes. What do we mean? What the act means by the disputes? The very first is between the employers and workmen, or between the workmen and workmen, or between the employers and employers, which is connected with the employment or non-employment, or the term of employment, or the conditions of labor of any person. So if there are disputes between these parties of trade unions, they consider it as a disputes, trade disputes. Workmen here means all those persons employed in the trade or industry, whether or not in the employment of the employer with whom the trade dispute arises. They call them as a workman. Next definition is of the trade union itself. It means any combination, whether temporary or permanent, formed first is primarily for the purpose of regulating the relations between the workman and employer, between the workman and workmen, or between the employer and employer. So here, according to the act, they consider trade union means the combination of different parties. The first is the primary purpose of regulating the relationship between this workman and employer, workman and workman, and employer and employer. We have also understood this earlier, that what do we mean by who are the parties, who are the participants of trade unions. Second is for imposing the restrictive conditions on the conduct of any trade or business. It includes any federation of two or more trade unions. So this is the definition of trade union by Trade Union Act 1926. Next is the appropriate government. What the act means by the appropriate government. In relation to trade unions not confined to one state, the appropriate government means the central government. For others, there is a state government who is authorized to deal with the trade unions. Appropriate governments are generally appoints the person to be the registrar of the trade unions, and it may also appoint the additional deputy registrar of the trade unions for the purpose of exercising and discharging under the superintendence of the registrar. Such powers and functions of the registrar as may be specified by the order and define the local limits within which they are to operate. So appropriate government regulates so and so trade unions and their functionings. Okay, now here the registration process of trade union is been narrated. Each and every trade union, if there are minimum less or more than 7 people who come together to form a trade union, has to be registered under the Trade Union Act 1926. So application for registration, any 7 or more members of trade union may subscribe their names and apply to form a trade union. Next step is the applicants ceasing to be members or disassociating not to affect the application unless their number is more than half. So once the trade union is been formed, unless the half member leave the trade union, it cannot be dissolved. Third is the document to be attached while you are applying for the registration. Copy of rules and regulations of trade unions that are made by the union members. Then statement of names, occupation, addresses of members making the applications. Next is in case of trade union of workmen, the names, occupation and address of the place of the work of the members making the applications, and the name of trade union and the address of its head office, and the titles, names, ages, addresses, all those demographic data of the officers of the trade union. Then is where the trade union has been in existence for more than 1 year before the making of an application, before they register the trade union. If it is working for more than 1 year, the general statement of assets and liabilities has to be submitted. Then once they apply and they get approval, they receive the certificate of registration. On registrar, it is required to issue a certificate of registration in the prescribed form, which will be conclusive evidence that the trade union has been duly registered under the Act. Okay, now if you want to cancel the registration, a certificate of registration of trade union may be withdrawn or cancelled by the registrar. So for that, trade union has to give an application. The certification has been obtained by a fraud or mistake. This can be possible, and the registrar is authorized to cancel the trade union. And if registered trade union of workmen has ceased to have the requisite number of members, then also it automatically gets the dissolved. Then minimum requirement of membership, registered trade union of workmen must at all the times continue to have not less than 10% or 100 of the workmen. So whichever is less, the subject to a minimum of 7 members engaged or employed in an established or industry with which it is connected. So there has to be minimum 7 members of a trade union, then and only they can form a trade union. Okay, so what are the privileges if you register the trade union under the Act? It helps in integrating the different activities of different organizations, and not only organization, it is beneficial for the government also to regulate the bodies and to integrate all the trade unions into one way of working or in a one direction. Second is the separate fund for political purposes. trade unions can create their own fund, and they can even stand in the elections, and they can separate the funds for the political for elections also. And third is a protection from punishment for criminal conspiracy. If anything happens like that, then the registered trade union members will get a protection also. And if it is not working, or if anything a criminal thing happens, then they are also liable for the punishment. Then protection from the civil suits and enforceability of agreements. um, uh, Registered trade unions can enforce the members to do certain agreements, and even they enforce the sometimes the employer also to do the registration. Then right to inspect the books of trade unions. All those members of registered trade unions are authorized to check the book of accounts of so and so trade unions. They have those authorities, and right of minors to be the members, so they all have those benefits of the minors also. Okay, so where this utilization of funds of trade unions can be done. All those officers of trade unions, their salaries comes from those funds. Those administrative expenses, then defending suits. So whatever dispute is going on in the courts, and whatever cost that occurs, all those money goes from the funds. Then conduct of trade union dispute on behalf of trade unions. Then compensation to members, allowances to the dependents, provisions for educational and social benefits of those workers and members, maintaining a periodicals, and to any beneficial causes. So trade unions can generate the funds, and they can utilize the funds as given. Then is a political fund. So expenses for the election, as I said, can be made through those funds. Then maintenance of a person who is so elected, these funds can be used for that. Holding of any meeting, or the distribution of any literature or documents in support of any such candidates, and the funds can be utilized. And maintaining electoral role on holding political meetings, the funds can be utilized for the same. Now, how this trade unions can be dissolved? As said earlier, if you want to dissolve the trade unions, a notice can be given, signed by at least 7 members, and by the secretary of trade union, shall be sent to the registrar within the 14 days. And the registrar may dissolve and see to it that the funds are divided amongst the members as per the rules. So they have to attach supportive documents for the dissolution. Okay, so we keep it till here in this video. We have completed the trade unions, and the next video I'll be talking about the collective bargaining. So till then, see you all the students. Keep learning, be safe, stay at home.